tonight's bill gives us all an opportunity to address what's wrong with charities in this state. But more importantly, I think it brings the means to bring about reform and improve the climate that's facing the charity sector. I think there will be general agreement right across the benches in relation to that. And since the financial crash, the charity and community sector have faced an avalanche of cuts, and the lack of regulation in this area for so long has brought some high-profile organisations use and the abuse of private donations they receive. But most organisations do fantastic work, and yes, the shocking revelations about some organisations are going to be extremely damaging to this sector. The high wages of the CEOs of some voluntary organisations that they've been paying themselves is appalling, I think, for most people in Irish society. And it seems like an awful and persistent hangover from the so-called Celtic Tiger days, and it has created a grand canyon between donors and those organisations that they traditionally supported. This fear, coupled with the poor economic state, means that high-profile, well-run charities are struggling to meet rising demand with falling donations. And the greedy actions of a few are a brutal betrayal to all those who donate to an organisation, as well as those who work in the frontline services that the charity sectors provide. The most outrageous over these recent scandals are the common man and woman who donate to these organisations, or those who work in the sector. And a lot of organisations in the sector have been calling for regulations for years, as charities have been unregulated since the foundation of the state. The 2009 Charities Act, which would create a Charities Regulation Authority to ensure greater accountability and transparency in the sector, I think, as speakers have heard in the last 2 nights are saying, is urgently needed. This bill before us would introduce the advancement of human rights argued for by the sector, but excluded by Fianna Fáil government when it brought the 2009 Charities Act. It also specifies a date, which is the 31st of May, for the full enforcement and enactment of all provisions of the 2009 Act. So, as Sinn Féin spokesperson on Foreign Affairs, I've seen first-hand the life-changing work that Irish charities and NGOs do, not only on this island, but in some of the most impoverished places around the world. And Ireland is well known for its commitment to overseas aid and development, and we have a hard-won badge as a world leader in this sector. And this is directly linked to the hard work of the NGOs and charities, and through the consistent generous donation of Irish people. The vast majority of these organisations are self-regulating, and their commitment to accountability and transparency is due to their own commitment to provide the most effective aid and assistance programme. So, for example, in 1993, a combination of Irish NGOs came together to form DOCUS, which provides those NGOs with a forum for consultation and cooperation and helps them speak with a single voice on development issues. It also helps the NGOs become more transparent, accountable, and works towards ensuring that the organisations in this sector follow the highest standards of practice. In fact, DOCUS members are fully compliant with the Statements of Recommended Practice, Accounting and Reporting by Charities, are the so-called SORP standards. And while SORP standards are British regulations, have no jurisdiction outside Britain, a lot of Irish charities have voluntarily adopted them in order to follow respective practices in relation to accounting and reporting, and most particularly to satisfy their many stakeholders in this regard. While their voluntary commitment to these practices is definitely to be welcomed, there also needs to be government legislation across the charitable sector to ensure that the highest standards of practices and accountability. Lest we forget, this is a huge sector with over 8,000 charities registered in this state, which employ over 100,000 people and has an estimated turnover, as other speakers have said, of 5.7 billion a year. So any regulation needs to be transparent and fit for purpose, and it can't be done on the cheap or because of recent scandals that the Public Accounts Committee have helped uncover. The passing of regulation and legislation to regulate this sector and the establishment of a charity regulator needs to be financed, have actual authority and, most importantly, independence. So one of the reasons this sector is so big is because of consecutive governments' disastrous record in healthcare, social protection, housing provision, poverty reduction and inequality in Irish society. The lack of rights-based legislation. Nelson Mandela once said, and he's badly missed, overcoming poverty is not a task of charity, it's an act of justice. And it would do us all well in relation to reflect on this. And I think we have to regulate the charity sector, but we also have to start meeting the basic needs and the realisation of our own citizens. And I think that's the key. People are rightfully angered. They're exhausted. Many are worn out trying to access services for loved ones. We've heard that debate in this House many times. They're exhausted filling out forms to get basic services for their child or family member. And tonight's bill, in my opinion, will improve transparency, bring clarity and new thinking to this sector. But most importantly, it will shine a light on those charlatans and parasites that are exploiting the goodwill and generosity of Irish people.